And I will first say I am thrilled and delighted to be on the NAMI Mid-Hudson board. I had been a board member for about 4 years, around 2000 to 2004, for NAMI Familia in Rockland County. And it is a place where I certainly learned a lot about resilience when I started working closely with families. And I also felt that it bolstered my clinical work with patients at that time in research. The other thing is, personally, I have always valued the idea of resilience to kind of improve my own coping skills over time. I haven't had many severe challenges or crises, but in life we all have something that will give us pause. And certainly these are the times when we are all not only paused by Governor Cuomo, but taking stock of what life is and where we're at. And so it felt like a perfect time to offer something, because it is Mental Health Month. And we're not putting up ribbons right now, but we as a collective board determined that this might be a nice offering. And I want to particularly thank Joanne and George and Barbara for all of their prep work together, and for Katie for some of the retyping of the handouts that I believe you all have. We are recording this so that it will go onto the website. We'll also have a copy of a PDF of the slideshow. And I just ask that that not be copied or distributed, so it's for personal use. So don't get yourself all wound up about not being able to write things down as I go through the slides. We're using the chat for any questions that come up during our time together. I would like to think of it as a conversation, even though it comes across as a presentation. But we will get to some of the questions as we move through our time together. So with that, this spiffy title came up when Joanne and Katie and I first started talking about something I had shared with the board. I had given a little talk like this to the woman at Unshattered. I was going to do a lunch and learn, and then the pandemic closed everything down, and they were busy making masks, and I had put a handout together, and we also did a Zoom. And so this naturally came out of that. But I also, for 3 years at St. Joseph's Medical Center, the Intermediate Care Unit, my bookends for treatment was a recovery group and a resilience group. And so over 3 years' time, we together came up with lots of things to share and bolster the ability to grow through difficult times. So I think that's enough of an introduction, and I'm going to get started. Oh, the fields of challenge sprout resilience. You're going to see there's lots of metaphors here. There's lots of mixed metaphors, but somehow we were taken with the spring and how beautiful it was, and the idea that in those challenging fields, the storms, the droughts, the difficulty with not knowing which crop is going to actually work, we learn something and we move forward. And oddly enough, and it came in the mail today, I'm holding it up, you probably can't see it, but it's called The Resilient Gardener. And it's about food production and self-reliance in uncertain times. You would think it was just written and published now. It was actually published in 2010. But when Joanne and Katie and I came up with this title, and I happened to see this book, I said, I've got to get it. So the synchronicity of it arriving today, I think, is telling that we're on the mark. Okay, first issue here. Okay, so what is resilience? Well, I bet you have been hearing the word resilience thrown around on news shows, TV talk shows, by Governor Cuomo. Everyone is talking about resilience. And one of the thoughts I have is, yes, it's a very popular concept, and it has come into its own within the last decade or so as being something people can relate to. But it's not always used correctly. Sometimes they're talking about perseverance or persistence or grit, which is actually another psychological concept about getting down dirty and mustering yourself through. And I think that's what a lot of people have been doing through this. And because that relies on the adrenaline flowing and the energy being high, it can be exhausting. So it doesn't always mean that people are practicing resilience while being persistent and putting their nose to the grindstone. So a simple definition of resilience is that ability to bounce back to baseline after some stress or crisis or other challenge in life occurs. So it's the coping with the hard times and returning to normal. So of course, here's the prop. Think of a rubber band, right? We all want a good stretchy one so that it retains its shape, and after being stretched and stressed, it can return. We know about those dried up rubber bands that snap as soon as we try. So that's a simple definition, and it's another metaphor to have in mind. But a better definition is it's a process, and it's adaptation. So some trauma, tragedy, threat, or some other negative event, adversity, challenge occurs. And so then it's the process of what behaviors we have, what thoughts we have, what actions we have to bounce back. And it's not only bouncing back. Sometimes, and think about that kid in school that would snap the rubber band and let it go flying. Sometimes it may actually bounce forward so that when a crisis passes, you can consolidate and understand what was learned and the skills that you developed. So it's transformative. And that's something the American Psychological Association started talking about a few years ago, that this idea that it's not just coming back to baseline, but it may be moving in a different way. And we have certainly heard everyone talk about returning to normal, maybe, but maybe it's going to be a new normal. So I think that's another nice idea, and I'm not going to flip my rubber band. So when do we need resilience? Well, I think of it as when we reach a breaking point. That's sort of the seed. That's sort of when we have to start working on resilience. And a breaking point in sort of just everyday ways of talking about it, when we're overwhelmed, when we're overburdened, you know, it doesn't feel good, we're anxious, we're depressed, or something traumatic happened. Like today, one of our board members or the staff had a car accident, right? That's still active, something traumatic. It's a breaking point. It can also be an emotional reaction, feeling angry or disrespected, feeling depleted, you know, kind of burned out, not having resources. Or it could be a sensitivity, not feeling wanted, not feeling loved, feeling abandoned or rejected. That could lead to a breaking point. And in general, poor coping habits, right? All of the addictions or other ways that involve negative coping habits, that can lead to a breaking point. Like the people speeding out of control on the roads right now. So when people have a breaking point, what usually happens? Well, again, individuality takes the center stage there, right? People can withdraw and hibernate. They can lash out, have outbursts, temper tantrums, cry, run away, throw up, shake, tremble, throw things, getting physically aggressive, hurting oneself, drinking, drugging, having intense physical pain that might have emotional roots. And basically, again, I had mentioned the adrenaline, there is this fight or flight, right? So there's this active chemical reaction going on when that breaking point is reached. So that's the reason why we need resilience, right? Because it's that path to the other side. It's getting back into some balance, some homeostasis. Without resilience, you can't return to baseline. You can't learn from the experience. You can't gain some personal insight. So it is about the capacity to grow and develop. So anyone who has been involved with therapy or just been more self-aware will understand that that's the process of going through something difficult and not just reacting in the moment. That's what we call impulsivity, right? But being able to gain one's balance and equilibrium. So these are some of the prerequisites or the things that we need for resilience. You have to stand still and you have to feel the pain. You have to understand what's going on. So resilience isn't the magic pill that takes away the pain or the suffering. It's literally about, if you pull that rubber band, you see that tension that's there, and even on my fingers, I can feel the tension. It's stopping there. It's feeling it. It's being in that moment and accepting. It's radical acceptance, right? So it's not like you're fighting it, and it's not like you're ignoring the sorrow and the pain. Yeah, the outcome of resilience is something positive, but that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be the difficulty at the time that you're going through it. So as I said, think about that rubber band being stretched and then staying there with all that tension long enough, how to bounce back. So you can see why when people turn to drinking or drugging with that tension, it's because they want to relax the tension, right? They're trying to deflate something without understanding perhaps an opportunity that might be there. Also, it's not fighting it to the point where we've all had that rubber band snap our fingers and give us that little pain, right? So it's not trying to push through beyond the limit, beyond where you really need to be. And we'll come back to that idea of radical acceptance and standing still with the difficult feelings as well as the opportunities. So resilience takes time to develop. Again, back to that field, plant the seeds. Well, it's months and months and months before harvest. Or I know I was talking about asparagus with someone because I got a little plot over at Stony Kill this year. I haven't planted anything yet, but I said, I think I want asparagus because you planted, it's a perennial. And they said, oh, it can take about 3 years before you get a crop. I said, okay, but at least I plant it once, right? So if you think about resilience, what's going to start tonight, and it might be good if you have paper or a pen nearby, because you might get a thought, you might get a feeling or a picture. And by thinking about what seed just dropped, you're going to be able to say, yes, I want to commit to this, right? So there are these individual differences with resilience. Another thing that's happening is, everyone's talking about resilience, and I thought, wow, some people might think, well, I guess I don't have it. So-and-so has it, but I don't have it, right? That's blame the victim. No. We all have a different innate capacity, but we all have the ability to develop it. So it's not a personality style or trait. It's not a character related to character development. It's not related to values or worldview as the be all and end all. Those things influence it and have an impact on it. And we have to, again, understand where we're coming from with that. We may have had good role models, or we may have been an easy baby, right? That kind of rolls with the punches. And so, but if you get stuck in thinking people have it or don't, you're not gonna be able to see that you can really think about this as developing new skills. Many of you in what you wanted from this presentation was to develop new skills or add to your toolkit or new information. And as we go through this, you may get something new, you may not. Maybe you'll get it in a different way. And I think that's something to pay attention to for yourself. So you have to feel confident. I am going to be able to build my resilience. And two first important steps is, and I've put them out here because it's sort of the foundation. I call it the voice deep inside because I'm very intuitive, right? And so I want to listen. And usually that sort of predisposition is to take good care of oneself, right? So right now, make a list of the ways that you are paying attention to good self-care. You should be able to jot down a few. Along with self-care is self-compassion, right? And that's about loving oneself. And that's different, but they may be connected, right? I always think about the do unto others as you would do unto yourself does start with doing for yourself. So self-care and self-compassion are linked, but you might want to think about an affirmation, a way of reminding yourself to love yourself. And if you follow some of the Tibetan Buddhism, a lot of work is done on compassion for others and self-compassion. An example of an affirmation that I found in a tea bag was appreciate yourself and honor your soul, right? And that might just be something I have nearby to read to myself or say to myself or commit to memory. So it's going to take time, but we can all do it. While you may be thinking that resilience is about coping skills or stress management, what I would say is that focuses more on the present, the here and now. So when we're coping and dealing with stress, we're right in the here and now. So resilience goes beyond that because there's also a future investment. Whatever you're doing to build your resilience may be used up in ways related to coping and dealing with stress, but it may be adding to like that compost pile for the field, right? It's getting turned over, and what you're doing is thinking about the future. So it's the best investment in the future. It's building those reserves, the ups and downs in life that come our way without our permission. One of my favorite all-time quotes is by Milton Erickson, and it's, "Life will bring you pain all by itself. Your responsibility is to create joy." I wouldn't say joy is resilience or resilience is joy, but I think resilient people look for the joy and find the joy, even in the moments that are very dark. So it's about investing, looking to the future, getting prepared for what might come your way that you don't even know, but you know how life is. So another metaphor, it's that deep well that has a reservoir of water, right? When we're thirsty, we want to go. We want to get that bucket of water up. Even if there's a drought, you want to be able to fill the bucket. You want to quench your thirst, right? So you have to know where you're going to place that well to begin with. Or maybe you have to titrate how much you're taking out so that you have to wait for the rains, right? So resilience is about kind of being a good caretaker of the resources that you're working on building. If you deplete them too quickly, you're back to nothing in the well. So how do we build it? Okay, it's part of your personal journey. It's individualized, and different people are going to have different strategies. We are actually going to go over 10 strategies. And those strategies will actually, at times, look like they're overlapping. And that's okay, because I want to think of it like weaving the different strategy strands together. And if anyone is a weaver, you know, the more strands you have, the tighter the weave, the stronger something is. But again, we said that we might all have different levels of resilience, and they may be accounted for by things like our gender, our culture, our religion. Women have a greater capacity for social networking than men. Social support and social networking is a buffer against stress. It's also positive for resilience. I think that's true that in some of the individuals in their 20s and 30s, women with schizophrenia, for example, may do better than men because they are still connecting. Our culture, some cultures zip the lips, don't say anything, keep it a secret, don't share feelings, right? So know your culture and how it would affect your capacity for resilience, because obviously self-disclosure and sharing is going to be part of getting the support that you need. And religion. Some people are religious or spiritual, have some faith, and use guidelines that allow one to feel connected when one is working on their resilience. So think about what yours does for you. What? Okay. So to develop resilience, I believe everyone has the capacity to learn new strategies. Okay, we have all learned how to deal with Zoom. Did we know that 3 months ago? No. Learning new things is great for the brain, great for our overall way of dealing with challenges. So believe in your capacity to learn something new. And strategies can be a combination of actions and behaviors, what you do, what are habits, what are routines, and attitudes and perspective. So thoughts are very much a part of the strategy of building resilience, and self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to handle challenges. If you see the negative self-talk, then you know that's something that you have to work on again as part of the foundation with the self-compassion and self-care, to believe in yourself. So now we're going to go through the 10 strategies, and you may see a lot of common ground here, and just think about it as how it relates to resilience, right? That bouncing back, that bouncing forward, that integrating a new way of seeing something. So staying connected. Anyone involved with NAMI knows the importance of social connection and support. My mother, who was born in 1921 as an immigrant to Norwegian people, mother and father, her mother was ill. And when I first told her about NAMI, she had a psychiatric hospitalization. She didn't speak English, and it was the days of Pilgrim State. When I told my mother about NAMI when she was still alive, she said, "Oh my goodness, we didn't have that." But I always knew that I had to talk about it. I wasn't ashamed about it. So my mother had this resilient character about not feeling as though there was stigma involved with illness. But I'm saying that because here we are on a NAMI platform, right? So the strong relationships, the getting support, knowing who you can turn to, that's a key one, because we all might have people in our support network. However, we might learn that sometimes when we turn to someone, it's actually a negative support. It doesn't make us feel good. It makes us doubt ourselves, and actually that can be detrimental. So figuring out, and in times of needing to work on resilience, that's an important element, knowing who you can turn to. Face to face. Well, we are the Jetsons. We are the Jetsons. We're here on Zoom. So we're calling this face to face, even though I'm not in the room with you, and I hope to meet many of you through the years. Accepting help. If there's one thing I can say from personal experience, from watching people, anyone who's a caregiver is so good at giving care that they sometimes don't need it themselves, or they don't think they need it themselves. So being able to understand that it's okay to say, I need help, or I am like everyone else, and I need to accept something. And I always say we've got two hands, the giving hand and the receiving hand, right? So all these little gestures and metaphors are reminders to keep this close when you're thinking about building your strength and your resilience. Staying active in groups, belonging, all kinds of groups, interest groups, knitting groups, book reading groups, any kind of group that has a shared interest is as important as coming together to talk about emotional issues. And we know there's a lot of research about how and again, this is a tricky one for caregivers because altruism or doing for other people, right? Charitable works, getting involved with helping. It's wonderful. It's part of what we value in this country. We saw it with 9/11. We're seeing how people are giving to food banks and coming together to help people. Altruism is a way of staying connected. So that was strategy 1, right? Strategy 2. This is more how you think of something, right? Don't look at a crisis as insurmountable. So you might not have personal control over the event that is happening or happened, but how you interpret the event is in your control. So here's that cognitive behavioral stuff, right? That's powerful, how you interpret, because that becomes the control that you still have. And here are some examples. So instead of focusing on what's wrong, turn your attention to what is right. We always know about the glass half empty and half full. It's half, right? If we always look at what's wrong, we're going to get stuck in thinking something cannot be overcome. So you want to look at something that's right. I give a little example lately because I've been working on cleaning out someone's house, a family member who died 2 years ago. He was a real collector of about 3,000 books and knickknacks and paintings and clothes, and I can get overwhelmed. But if I open every closet or every drawer that has been cleaned out, it balances out for me the work that's been done and the work that still needs to be done. And that's how I can interpret what's in my control that moment. Being able to keep things in perspective. One of my favorite sayings is, "This too shall pass," right? So some personal phrase or mantra can help one remember this is not going to last forever. People who are doing mindfulness meditation will understand this principle, right? That some things just come and go. You know, we're the ones that are sort of are attaching and holding on to things. So the take home here is you're optimistic because you're looking at a problem as time limited, specific, and temporary. Time limited, specific, and temporary. That's the opposite of something that cannot be overcome. And along with this, you are building positivity. And again, psychology was late to the table with thinking of positive psychology. However, positivity is an important characteristic to develop. And that doesn't mean we're Pollyanna. It doesn't mean that we overlook the difficulty, but we still try to think of things as time limited, specific, temporary, and what can be in our control. So strategy 3 kind of moves into the actions, right? To be goal oriented. While goals may change, while obstacles right now are standing in the way of high school graduations and college graduation ceremonies, one can feel off kilter, right? Because the goals that have been worked on look like they're not achieved, but they are. So you still have to celebrate the achievements, the small ones as well as the large ones. And even keeping a little journal or in a diary or in your calendar, keep record of accomplishments. That's positive reinforcement. If you can put down what was done, not what to do, but what was done. That bolsters a sense of accomplishment. When things change, be flexible. You have to know what has occurred is real. You know, I was thinking about the flooded fields in our heartland of America. And I started to think, well, I wonder if the farmers are thinking about if the flooding never recedes, maybe they're going to have to grow rice, right? In other words, what can still be on a path of goal direction, but at the same time would be a sort of different path, right? So this is an important question. What is one thing I can do today to help me move in the direction I want to go? Doesn't say what's the whole plan, what's going to be one step into the next step. It's one thing. And that is staying in the moment. And it is the one day at a time, but it's a question when it's related to goals that I think is important. What is one thing I can do today? It doesn't burden you, and it frees you, and it keeps you moving forward. And that's what resilience is. This is a great one, being creative, improvising, and innovating, brainstorming. Sometimes it's the moments where everything goes topsy-turvy, where something bigger or better comes out of it. Some people may be better at this kind of thinking than others, but again, that's where social support helps, because you don't let yourself be alone, and you kind of look at things in a different way by sharing. And that's important. It's related to, again, developing resources. So when we have our goals, we want to know what are the emotional resources, what are the informational resources, what are the social resources to keep us on track. These are all related to building resilience. Strategy 4. Okay, why wasn't it number 1 when I said it was the foundation? Well, we take it for granted, but we really shouldn't. We can all improve on these. So when we talk about self-care, we talk about the mental, the physical, and the spiritual. We talk about relaxation. We talk about our healthy habits of how we eat, how we exercise. Do we get enough sleep? Those are things we take for granted. But if you really look at what you're doing, and you don't kid yourself, we all have room for improvement on every one of those, right? Unless you're Jane Brody, who seems to be like Saint Jane Brody with how she eats and exercises and sleeps. But that's been a lifetime. She writes for the New York Times, and there was a recent article that I thought, oh my goodness, she's just making it seem like it's out of everyone's reach. But it's building habits over time. When I worked at St. Joseph's in Yonkers, I was getting 4 to 5 hours a night sleep, and I really do need my 7 to 8. So you can imagine how my rubber band was like really drying out and not stretchy, and it was difficult. So think about those basics, and if there's something wrong with how you're handling food or not sleeping, that might be a time to talk to someone about whether you might need some additional assistance. The meditation, whether it's positive visualization or mindfulness, I do something called centering prayer. There's all kinds of meditative practices, but it is part of the spiritual and the mental capacity to withstand the stress. Hopefulness. Look for the things that are uplifting, whether it's the people in your life, the TV shows, the books, the friends. Just look for the hope. It is there. And I always look for a rainbow. I don't know if anyone else does it, but every time, and it's great in the Hudson Valley, because every time as the sun is setting, if we've had that thunderstorm and you start to see a glimmer of light, run, and you will see a rainbow appearing in the eastern sky if you have that viewpoint. But be prepared. Sometimes they're so fleeting, but that's what hope is. It might be fleeting, but it's something to lift you up in a moment when you need it. This is an important one. Remember, we said caregivers don't always take care of themselves. They also may not know that they have to pay attention to their own needs and feelings. Being able to name it, being able to state it, being able to have people respect that you matter and count is an important part. For some people, that might be as simple as knowing how to say no. Or, I need to think about that. If you've been the kind of person that always says yes automatically, or they come to you, self-care is about knowing what your limit is. Strategy 5, we're halfway there. You tired? Because this can be exhausting, but it could be like sort of a treasure hunt, right? What's resonating with me? Where am I gonna start? So you want to learn from experience. Everyone that has overcome past problems has learned something, and many people share it. Just take a look at all the memoirs that people have shared about their journey. Look at the people that you respect who have gone through life challenges and coped well. I love Eleanor Roosevelt, one of our great women of the Hudson Valley. Feel the fear and do it anyway. She was right there through a lot of crises, personally and societal, and she's someone that I respect. Think about who you respect. Look for the hidden meaning and purpose, which helps you gain a new perspective. So that's sort of the silver lining. But again, it doesn't mean there's a special message, or it doesn't mean that something happened, something so awful happened so that you did get to a good place. But there is some way, and I'm not going to say it in Norwegian, but my father had a proverb. He was from Norway. There isn't anything so bad that isn't good for something. And when I was a little girl, it was like, well, what does that mean? There isn't something so bad that isn't good for something. But that's what we're talking about with that perspective of learning from our experience, or seeing that something would come of something that we may not necessarily think is good in any way. Strategy number 6. Here's more about our behaviors, taking decisive action. We all know about defense mechanisms, right? We do not want to avoid, we do not want to deny, we don't want to detach. Things do not go away. Resilient people do not turn their back and try to avoid taking the responsibility of what they are facing, right? They are going to face it head on. They are going to be active. They are going to, at times, give themselves a timeout or distract themselves, right? If something stressful is going on, being able to go to the bathroom, being able to take a little walk, doing some deep breaths, having a little game on your phone that you can just focus on. They've actually been using a lot of these strategies with the frontline healthcare workers, that in the moment, what can you do to just kind of grab hold, right? Distract yourself and give yourself time out. So the question here that I like is, what can I do to improve this situation, right? You don't want to make something worse. So detaching or wishful thinking or magical thinking is a way that will make things worse. So what can I do to improve this situation? And then the Nike expression, then do it. Doing something can help you regain a sense of control. Little actions, right? And again, I'll give it a simple little thing. I was sitting and knitting a baby blanket, and I was listening to some music, and I had a moment of relaxation, and I looked up on a shelf and I saw these glass things full of dust. And I thought, oh yeah, when was the last time I washed those, right? And I didn't say, oh, yeah, well, I'm not going to do it now because I'm knitting. No, I actually got up and did it. And I felt, wow, okay. So again, this is an example that when you take decisive action, you're not letting things build up, right? You're dealing with the things, even the small things. The small things actually might make the most difference. And I just want to go back to that. So if you have difficulty making decisions or acting, again, turn to social support. Get that nudge, get that buddy, get that person who can help you. You know, I had a lot of family members with a lot of depression, and we know depression takes away initiative, takes away motivation. And so sometimes that means being able to break things down, going back to goals, going back to what can be done today to improve the situation. So some action is still possible. Strategy number 7, back to how you're viewing yourself. Nurture yourself, but nurture it in a positive way. Not everybody feels confident in their problem solving, but we all as human beings have a capacity to solve problems. Naming the problem might be more difficult than solving the problem. So again, helping yourself be able to stay in the moment long enough to figure out, where am I here and what is the problem that's developed? Or if I don't know the problem, maybe somebody else sees the problem. But being able to be confident that you can exercise that control, be a little innovative or creative, and be able to move through to some solution. And again, if you are intuitive, trust that. That is sometimes something that we don't think about because we are always using logic, but it's a different way of kind of feeling about a situation, and that might be positive. Gratitude journals, if you've never done it, it's a powerful tool. It's a way of building resilience because again, it's looking at the positivity in a situation. And back to the self-affirmations and positive self-talk. So you can see those strands are starting to come together on some level. Strategy number 8. Through all of this, you are examining and reflecting and understanding. So it's about self-discovery. That's what resilience is. And that's why it also takes time. If you're in the middle of a crisis and you are really coping head on and fight or flight and sort of protecting your reserves by doing good self-care, you're not going to have all the thought like, oh, you know, what's going on here and what am I learning? No, it's going to come over time. So after the hardship, how did I grow? What came of this? You know, back to what we talked about, and it's down here, embrace enhanced relationships or reevaluate those that aren't working. Part of it might be, I don't know if that person is in my inner circle the way I thought, but look at this other person over here. They were really there for me. And when I asked for help, it was easier to talk with that person. So that's self-discovery, right? It's sort of taking or doing an examine or taking stock. This is very important for resilience, and I kind of hinted at it before, but you're going to have mixed feelings through crises. And you can't just look at the positive. So you may think about this as the dialectic, right? The dialectical behavior therapy is about both end, right? Thinking and feeling. They're both happening. Feeling empowered, but feeling vulnerable. They're both happening. You're not doing either or. You're either all powerful or totally mush and very vulnerable. It's both. There is power in both end. And that, I think, is so related to resilience that if you don't think about anything else with these strategies, think about that perspective. Remember, when you love yourself, you feel valuable. And as you go through difficulties, I kind of handled that okay. That's that self-talk, that's positive reinforcement. Do it, and give yourself a pat on the back if someone else isn't doing it, or ask for it. I think I need that recognition right now. I think I really handle something better than I thought. Positive reinforcement is a powerful way to change behavior. You might find with the self-discovery that you have a better appreciation for life or spirituality. Think about how many people have said, what a beautiful spring we've been having. We're slowed down long enough that we're paying attention if we can, and we are recognizing something that we may have been missing. That's self-discovery. Being able, as I said, to reevaluate the relationships. But this personal growth is part of the reward of working on one's resilience, right? So it's kind of the right stuff that gets added to the deep well for the future. So that's why it doesn't happen in the moment. It happens over time. And I think this is a good time for me to say, you might hear Governor Cuomo in the next week starting to talk about coping circles. And it's the initiative of volunteer mental health professionals doing support groups of 6 people for 6 weeks based on their life circumstances related to the pandemic. Why did I say it here? Well, it's about enhancing the self-discovery, because people may be through the initial crisis, but being able to want to share with other people what they've learned or hear what someone else learned, so that they too may feel connected to what has happened through these months. Strategy 9, we're almost there. And here's where you had the handout of the toolkit for a personal toolkit. And I do invite you to look through, if you have nothing but a Ziploc baggie, or you might have some little bag, you really want to build a toolkit to be able to determine what you are carrying, that you're going to remind yourself what you have to do, whether it's an action, behavior, a thought, a feeling related to the resilience. So I have some things in here, and I'll just walk you through. So when I put this little wallet in here, it reminded me that I have some resources. Well, I looked at the resources, and I have a Norwegian $500 crown. Well, that might remind me that some things are not accessible right now, but that doesn't mean that the resources disappeared. That helps with resilience. Another thing I put in with the toolkit is one of those ear plugs for plugging in to a plain audio system. But again, tuning into the positive messages, not the negative ones, would be what I was doing in that part of my toolbox. I know someone's gonna like this. A tea bag, my yogi ginger tea. Ginger settles the stomach, but also it's warming. And this is where I've gotten some of these lovely statements, like a fortune cookie. It's all about adapting, right? It's all about change. It's all about learning something new. It's not one size fits all. So that's a perspective. And it always can start fresh. So that's just a little toolkit I put together. So I think you can all figure out what you might want to do. And the handout had things like the Nike shoes and the chewing gum about getting stuck in patterns or getting tied up with the twist tie or going back to something that doesn't work again, or a watch reminding. So be creative and make a toolkit. Carry it with you. It's concrete. And it is a way for you to know you are in control of working on these tools and developing new habits and a different outlook so that you can become resilient. The next handout, and I'm holding up the handout. Oh, and I see something else that I didn't do, but this one's going to take more work, okay? And you can think of examples from this pandemic, from family illness, from something else you are working on that's been a personal challenge. But the idea here, and that dropped off there, I think, George, in that version, which is okay. We're not going to, because you have this in front of you. You have it in front of you. So the idea here is it's got 3 columns. It's a spreadsheet going across. So in the first column, you're looking at your breaking point. What is the stress? What's going on that is creating the problem? The second one I'm calling antidote. So that would be more like the here and now coping. And the last column would be the adaptation. Or the capacity to cope positively over the long run. And so if you have the handout and we look at feeling overwhelmed, the antidote in the moment, taking deep breaths or doing something like a muscle relaxation, right? It's going to change something in the immediate present time. But over time, to adapt and to realize every time I'm stressed, I'm feeling overwhelmed. You may go back to, oh, I'm not getting enough exercise. I'm not getting enough sleep. Maybe I'm having too much coffee or too much sugar. Maybe I'm expecting too many things of myself and I don't break it down. Maybe I really don't feel I count, or I don't value myself, or I don't love myself enough, right? So it's more the process over time. So that's a lot of homework, but it's important homework to do, because you're going to take that idea of the spreadsheet, but think about your own issues right now, and then think about what you do in the moment that is like the thing that kind of stops you long enough to be able to move on, and after dealing with a situation, process what just happened. So to summarize, whoa, we had a lot of metaphors here, right? From gardens to rubber bands. Here's another one. Resilience is like a dimmer switch. Lots of degrees, lots of variability, lots of movement. It's not just an on-off switch. We never turn our desire to become resilient off. We're always working on being resilient, because that's what's going to pay off in the future. It's kind of like, I guess because I had a car service today, here's another metaphor. It's kind of like going in for those routine maintenances, so that when something maybe catches you by surprise, or maybe it doesn't catch you by surprise because you've been doing the work all along, right? So it's a dimmer switch. Resilience is both the result of coping with challenges over time, but it's also the means of coping in a deeper way than just stress management. Resilience is a skill set. It takes practice. And we have had 10 strategies with lots of different parts of each strategy. But it's all about building the reservoir in our personal well. And I love that it's a well, right? We are building our well. That's a good one. I never thought of it like that. Resilience is about building reserves for the future. So it's a great investment. I would say stock exchange or not, it's what the money should be on. And it's about learning and growing and moving forward stronger. So how are you going to do that? Well, now is the time to start. When motivation is high, when the need is high, there are some things right now that will need to be parsed out. If people have lost a job, if someone has become acutely ill because they didn't want to cope with it and stopped taking medicine and maybe have been back in the hospital. But this is the time to start thinking about how am I going to work on getting my equilibrium and build for the future. Being patient and taking one day at a time is crucial. And the way you will break it down is what's the first thing you want to work on to start building your resilience. And there are 3 levels here. You can start something new. You can do more of something that's working. You might know what's already working for you and you just say, I just have to do more of that. Or you might want to do less of something that's not working. Now, you might notice what's missing here. It doesn't say stop doing what doesn't work. Well, cold turkey doesn't always work for everybody. However, if you keep doing less of something that's not working, ultimately, you won't be doing it at all. And that's the concept of breaking it down. What I realized I forgot to do was show this little Gestalt figure. And when I hold it up, it might look familiar. And if I say, what do you see? It's not a standardized psychological test. But if I said, what do you see? You might look and ponder and come up with something. And you may say, oh, I see 2 faces looking at each other, nose to nose. And that would be focusing on the black area. And then someone else says, well, I don't see that, but I see a vase or an urn. Well, where do you see that? In the white area, right? There's no right or wrong answer. It's designed so that both are possible. So it's a nice illustration of both end thinking. However, we have a tendency to look for one or the other. What resilience does is challenges our ability to see both, to change the perspective, to look again, to see what someone else maybe sees differently, and to find it, and then to hold it and switch back and forth. And that is the kind of flexibility that I think serves resilience well and is another strategy. So it wasn't where I wanted to do it with the both end slide, but there we are. And you may have lots of questions, and hopefully everyone didn't disappear and Joanne is there, because we were going to look at some questions and kind of answer them.
Hi, Nadine.
Hi. So I think I'm going to stop the share for now.
Okay.
And then I can see. Anyone?
So I think we forgot to mention in the beginning to put the questions in the chat.
No, but I mentioned it,
Oh,
but
okay.
maybe people were listening and it's hard to do 2 things at once. But we did think that maybe you would have some questions.
So if you do have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself. And if you want to turn your camera on now, that's fine too.
Maybe, oh, okay, so I see one question. Is it ideal to rely on all 10 strategy, or is it okay to rely on some more than others? Again, when I said it's individualized or personalized, you might gravitate towards some, but you may want to try something different. So in that way, looking across the 10, you may pick and choose. You don't have to stay to a strategy. It's sort of a mix and match. It was grouped sort of thematically, but again, if you're thinking of what goes together, I think the most important thing is, are you starting something new? Are you doing something more that's helpful, or are you doing something less that isn't helpful? And that can help you pick and choose, I think, the strategies. That's a good question. And also, there is no such thing as perfection when it comes to working on resilience and developing new skills. It's about practice. It's about trying things on for size. You know, yoga is not for everybody. Um, uh, Riding a bicycle isn't for everybody. But do we need some kind of exercise that will calm our mind and work off steam? Yeah. And do we need it regularly? Yeah. So it's okay. Um, you know, if you're someone that loves to go to a smorgasbord dinner and kind of mix everything up on the plate, go for it. It's not going to harm you. It's not going to overwhelm you. They're all good things, right? But if you want to break it down and really assess, is this helpful? Should I continue doing this? And remember, habits take a long time to develop. So don't give up necessarily after one or two attempts. If it feels like I'm going to give it a month, I'm going to see how I think about it in a month, you might see that something changes. Um, any other questions? So for people who might not know, in the chat, you click on the chat at the bottom of your screen, and you, okay, so here's another question. How do we communicate these strategies to someone who is stressing us out and may not understand our need for space or self-care? Well, it's a lot about assertive communication, right? Taking control by saying, I feel overwhelmed when you're not listening to me. I feel disappointed that I'm not being respected. I statements is a way of not blaming somebody, but trying to get someone's attention. And then you may need to give yourself time out. You may not be able to control someone else's reaction to you, right? That is part of what we're learning, what we cannot control, right? For those who know the Serenity Prayer, it's another tool. Yeah, and I think it is broken down. There was a comment. There is it's broken down so that uh, you can talk it through with yourself first, right? You don't have to convince someone else that they need to be resilient. That might contribute to an overall problem. So I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. So it's hard to tell the difference between resilience and a worn out hanging in there. Well, hanging in there is really persistence and perseverance. That's how I felt when I worked on my doctorate. Oy, oy, oy. You know, it was like a long, long journey that took a lot out of me. Resilience will give you a sense of buoyancy because there's that self-care component. So if it's dealing with an issue, again, you may be more focused on the other and not as much focused on yourself. So finding that balance. The worn out part can be during the adrenaline rushes when it's fight or flight. We go into a stage of exhaustion. You know, after the 3 years that I mentioned, commuting 4 hours a day and getting 4 to 5 hours sleep a night, I got really sick in October, and it knocked me, right? Our immune system is definitely related to all that we're enduring. I functioned at work, but that was all I could do, right? And my body sort of gave out. And, I think um, if you look back at the strategies or you think about your toolkit, there's something there that's giving some sense of renewal or rebirth. I know a lot of people right now are going through um, unbearable and very uncommon incidences in quick succession. So people have had death in their family, people have lost jobs, people who have been dealing with loved ones or elderly family members or young children are certainly burned out right now, right? They have been working on adrenaline. But if one has been simultaneously figuring out, is there some joy in this day? Oh, I found some photos and I can't be with people right now to mourn, but I'm going to put together a photo album of the memories that I am going to hold on to. And that is the resilient spirit. Uh, okay, I've lost this job and I'm not sure about the future, but I am really not alone. And so I am going to have to find out what resources are there so that I can join in. And maybe I never thought I would be in that situation, but I am, and I cannot avoid it. I have to deal with it. That's a reframing of the situation. So none of this talk was specifically geared to the pandemic, but I think many parts of it could be useful. And that is where I think, the story of an elephant and everyone's blindfolded and touching a different part. And so it can feel like a snake and it can feel like a tree trunk and it can feel like a pencil, depending on what part of the elephant. That's going to be, when you look back on the website, you don't have to listen to the recording, but you'll see the PowerPoint. You'll look through or maybe you wrote some notes, what it is for you that you're sensing and how you have to round it out. And does it relate to ongoing stressors in your life, or does it relate to the cultural experience of this virus and being blown out of our lull of thinking that this could never happen, when in fact it can, and now we understand, right? So I can go on, and I don't want to do that. So Joanne, George, Barbara, I know you can unmute yourself or come on screen if you want to give a little wave or a shout.
Hi, everybody.
Did
Everybody
go to sleep?
turn their cameras on now.
Did everybody go to sleep? Oh, when a person is worn down and exhausted, sometimes you forget to use your toolkit. How can you remind yourself? So that's why I know, hi, that's why something concrete or things written down or little journals that you've started, the things that are around, that it's sort of there in your face. Taking a long shower, a bubble bath, taking a walk, not an all-out strut, but just a stroll. Worn down is sometimes not having oxygenation in the blood, or it may be depression, right? It could mean a lot of things. But that's a sign that you have not been doing some of the self-care um, all along, you know, um, and it catches you. It catches you. So please start a toolkit. Please start your own little toolkit. Um, you know, I mean, maybe you have some ideas of what would be in your toolkit. What would it be? What would it be? I just showed you some silly things that I put in mine, but anyone? Okay.
Thank you so much, Nadine.
Oh, you're welcome. Was it too much information?
Wonderful.
No, it was great. Thank
Okay. Okay.
you. It was really good.
Very helpful.
Okay, good. So remember one thing that you can start, right? Don't try to slice it off. I mean, we all have a lot to do. And, you know, they always say that the teacher always picks the subject that they need to learn best, right? So along the way, I must have discovered that I need to always work on my resilience, right? And so this kind of gave me new life, even if I put makeup on today. um, I wish I could share that picture that I was talking about before of the heron down in the brook. But, all right, well, please be well, and start by drinking some water or a cup of tea, or taking that cooling off shower, or reading a passage in a favorite book, or put on some comedy, or figure out what you need right now to renew yourself. Okay. And I hope to meet all of you someday at some of our
Same here.